Guys, what is up? Welcome back to another episode of House Rules Podcast. I am your host, Alex Getlin.
I'm your other host, Rachel LaForce.
We are here. We are doing it. We are back per usual. But just in case this is your first time tuning in, listening in, however you choose to consume this podcast, we are two comedians. We are engaged only for a short time now.
Not so much longer.
Down to the wire. I mean, we've got about a month left of engagement life. And then we're married. But we do this podcast every week, going through a little bit of a rebrand right now. We get some hot rebrandness coming at you. I don't know.
Wow. We talked before the show and it said, who should do the intro? And I said, you do it. And now I'm going, should have done it. You know what I mean? If you want a job done right, you do it yourself.
Okay. Anyway.
Isn't that right? Joey, everybody, guys, give it up for our engineer, Joey, who's in here. We love him.
You guys can't see him, but he is a handsome young man.
He really is.
So anyway, we do this show every week, talk about a lot of different stuff. Sometimes we do fun segments, like games and little funny things. Other times we have guests. But today we're just going to talk. You know, you and I, Rachel, we have great conversations, sometimes heated, sometimes philosophical, but they're always good. But I want to talk about something that's interesting. So in California, we've got the election coming up. They sent us this booklet here. This like big packet of like all the information so you can be an informed voter, which theoretically is good. I tried to every year I'm like, I'm going to read through this. I'm going to be an informed citizen and make a. You're already rolling your eyes at me. I got to tell you, a lot of this stuff on here, I don't know. There's a lot. So if you're unaware, in California, there's all these different like propositions we can vote on that affect us at the state and local level of different laws.
Well, that's true everywhere people live.
No, I know, but I think some states have different sort of ways that they get to vote on stuff. Like, I don't think they have as many propositions they vote on in other states the way we do here in California.
Sure.
But, like, so one of them, for example, I'm going to just read this to you and tell me if you think that, like, you...
I mean, I already have so many opinions, but you're welcome to read this thing. It looks prepared. So, Joey and I are going to give you the stage and
so here's one.
Action.
Prop 23 establishes state requirements for kidney dialysis clinics, requires on-site medical professional initiative statute. Why would you and I vote on that? Like, why should we get to decide that? I don't know anything about kidney dialysis. And there's a whole pros and cons list here.
Well, here's the only reason why bulletins like this drive me absolutely bonkers is everything that's in this.
There you go. Yeah.
That was a dramatic reach around for those of you. I don't know if I should say dramatic reach around while you can only hear me, but
weird.
You know what I mean?
What kind of podcast do you think this is,
Anything to get clicks, baby. Selling my soul.
Right.
Okay, so this is like a solid... Like this is a mass here, this book, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Why this makes me crazy is this is the government's way of being like, well, if you're informed, like you would read this. Bullshit. If you guys actually cared about making sure that people were informed, the news would not be a hellscape right now.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be on fire. What you would be doing is you would go, great. Obviously, everybody's decided how they feel about the world right now. You know what I mean? Like, right now, if I met somebody and I was like, how are you? And they'd be like, I'm all right. I'd be like, you sure? Are you from the past? Are you from the future? Like, what do you mean? Like, it's bizarre to where, like, I almost feel like I'm prepared when I ask somebody, like, how are they? Like, prepared to hold space for somebody to be like, well, how long do you have? So I say that because it's like, that is what the job of the news is, to me, in my opinion. It's like, it is to educate and to inform.
Well,
that was the original purpose. And now it's just the traveling circus.
Well, so that's what I think theoretically. By the way, so Casey Whitaker, one of our loyal listeners, she says, post a pic of Joey. Joey, I don't know. I'm not going to post a pic of Joey, but if you want to pop on camera and say hi, you don't have to. He's a little shy. And then Casey, to your other question, no, I do not play tennis. I don't know why she's asking. This is not, okay. Anyway, guys, if you want to comment in, you can watch us live here. My point is, back to the conversation about the news. So like something like PBS, that is supposed to be like public funded. It's literally public broadcasting, no kind of partisan stance, etc. But we know at this point, all news is a moneymaker. It's designed, I mean, it's basically fan fiction at this point. And
100%.
It's hyper partisan.
That's why on either side, when somebody like it's just infuriating to me, I guess, at this point, because especially like this week, right? And there's all these people on the left, and it's like, boom, like here's Trump's like, and I'm like, Oh, I'm sorry. You thought that like there were actually people who believed that he's like an upstanding businessman.
You're
like
talking about how he paid like $700 in income tax for like 2016.
Yeah, and is like 100% fraudulent. Like no shit. We already knew all of that. We knew that before he was voted into office.
Not only that.
So that's the thing that like just like clearly I'm heated about this, but it's I said this day at our kitchen table because you were like, I love that like beforehand he was like, okay, so here are some things I thought maybe we could talk about, but like ask my permission because he knows that like I'm viable to just like my head exploding.
Well, I know we're not going to this episode dive into the Supreme Court pick. We'll wait on that. It's fine.
I mean, we can dance around it.
Well,
I'm like, you know, like talk. It's also like for me, especially because I feel like, and this is throwing a little shade at Republicans, okay? Because I always like to come to this podcast from a place.
You know me.
Let me listen.
I have no love for Republicans. So.
But I'm saying, this is more of, and not what the Republican Party is right now, because I think even Republicans are like, yeah, we have no idea what's happening. You know, people who've been like avid Republicans. But there's always kind of this, which I appreciate, which is like, you know, there's a lot of things that are said about people on the left because it's like, well, they don't respect these institutions. There should be respect, right?
Sure.
This kind of ideal. And I agree with that. There should be this element of it, right? I mean, I also believe like you get respect if you earn it, but, you know, c'est la vie. But where it was like, we didn't even let a week go by and fully celebrating the accomplishments, the lifelong accomplishments of Ruth before it was like ushering in this woman and then everybody on the right being like, she's going to overturn everything. Like, I mean, you can believe whatever you want to believe, but that is blatantly disrespectful and frankly gross.
So I agree with everything you said, except they're not pushing her on an agenda that she's going to flip Roe v. Wade. That's from what I've researched, that's not actually on the table, that they're actually trying to push that. But I do agree with you that, you know, we should have taken, in a perfect world. Well, again,
it's also who like, again, we're not even right now, we're not arguing from the same thing. Do you know how many things I've already seen of my friends that are like very, very Christian conservative that are already doing that of like, we're overturning all this. And like, there's all these different, you know, like meme accounts and all of this. So it's like to say that's not what they're pushing. It's like, well, who is they?
Well, so on the news note, though, so loyal listener Bob Getlin, thank you, Dad. By the way, just finished fasting for Yom Kippur. Shout out to all my fellow Jews. I hope you had a good fast Yom Kippur. Anyway, he said it's called.
Do you say what is the is there like a greeting or a saying?
Yeah,
because you don't just say like Happy Yom Kippur, or do you? That seems
good.
Very wrong.
I think good Yontov is. I have not been in a synagogue in a few years. I'm sorry, I haven't. I've been slacking on my Jewishness. But Dad, if you want to send a comment and remind me. But I know like good Yontif, I think is what you say around the high holidays. Like,
okay.
And I know like have an easy fast is something, you know, because Yom Kippur is.
Have an easy fast. There's probably plenty of people in Hollywood that say that to each other all the time. You know what I mean? Bunch of skinny models just walking around.
But I want to read this comment. So he wrote, it's called the news business in all caps. Always has been, even in my day. No money, no news. And he as a retired journalist.
Yeah. No, he's right. I mean, and that's like the other thing that I keep going back to, and we've even talked about that here on this podcast, where I'm like, you know, everybody who is, and I think it's probably even more of our generation, but also I've heard it from like our parents' generation. They're like, the world's getting so much worse and this and that. I'm like, I genuinely do not believe that.
Yeah.
Because the only difference between now and the 60s, the only difference between now and the Great Depression, the only difference between now and Vietnam is, and every other, you know, example that I could name, but who has that kind of time, right, Joey?
Well, we have an hour.
We have a 24-hour news cycle, and we have social media, and there is no way to escape what is going on in the world around. Like, you actually have to make a conscious effort to say, like, it used to be able to be like, right, of like, oh, I'm not really political, right? Like, now people can't, like, everything has been politicized.
You know,
everything.
And here's my issue. How I think we got here, you know. And this is not anything new. Everybody's kind of had this thought. But it's the byproduct of social media. Because what social media, 24/7, Facebook, Twitter, all that nonsense does is it's like when we watched The Social Network and the intention was good, where they're like, we're going to make
the social dilemma.
The social dilemma, thank you.
The social network.
Right. You know what I mean? Where they were like, we're going to make a like button to show that you like stuff, show support. And then they didn't think about the after effect. If you don't like something, you're not like you're implying that you don't like it, right? So the same thing, if you're not posting about all these causes, all these movements, all these things, then you're basically by default not supporting, not doing your thing. You know, it's just people kind of like assuming that if you don't speak about the things they speak about, you must be their enemy. And I saw something that really, this to me is indicative of why our problems are growing more and more. I saw something recently, and I forget who it was, not someone of importance, but someone like verified on Twitter, so someone important, I guess. And they're like, I just want to make it clear. Remember, if you vote for Trump this election, that is an act of violence against, and they like listed a bunch of groups of people. And it's like, okay, that's not, I understand that you might not like Trump. I don't like him either. And there's reasons to not vote for him. But to say it's an act of violence, you just look ridiculous. An act of violence is an act of violence. Violence is violence. Not right, voting for
no. But I hear what you're saying, and I know it seems hyperbolic. But again, you have to remember whether Trump becomes president and again, or whatever he continues to do. I mean, change the entire White House into like a candy store, whatever it is that he does, because he's absolutely out of his freaking mind, right? You and I, our lives won't change significantly because of the color of our skin, because of the resources that we have. I mean, I might be like, they'll be like, well, no more birth control, and be like, well, good timing for me because I'm trying to have a baby. But other than that, right, there's a lot of all of the women's reproductive rights that could be ripped away from me, right, which is very scary if we were to have a daughter. But other than that, most of our life will stay the same. You have to remember, for a lot of people that Trump rallies of like, yeah, they're the enemy and is inciting violence. If you are somebody with that color of skin where he is inciting violence, therefore it's not a large jump. I understand when you're seeing, like a lot of well-educated, young white people that are like out in the street, like, you don't even understand, right? And you're like, okay. I understand the frustration that people have towards that, but I do think what I have tried to do is when I see something that triggers me in one way or the other, whether I agree with it, but I'm like, I don't know, it seems a little far-fetched, or something on the other side where I'm like, that's factually incorrect. Like, that's not even right. And I get angry because of that. I have to stop and go, what's behind that? It's almost like in the way if I'm on stage and I know something happens really quick and two jokes pop into my mind, and it's like, is there one that only gets one laugh, and is there another one that could set me up for two laughs? It's like that filter.
I get what you're saying. I'm just saying, though, you can't. People are just running wild, being like, that's an act of violence, or it's like you're taking away what these words and sentences mean. You're diluting them, and you're just looking ridiculous. I understand that people are afraid of if Trump becomes president again. And there's other people I know that have actually like legitimate fears of the Democrats in power. And I'm actually pretty torn in the middle. I'm going to be honest. Like, I don't like Trump, but there's a lot of fucking problems with the Democrats. And the deeper you look, the more suspicious they get to me. And I know we've had...
Sure, because anybody in large positions of power with that much backing is not getting there because they're doing the right thing. Bernie Sanders, whether you agreed with him or not, was wanting to do the right thing,
and you know what?
For most people.
If the Dems didn't screw up and ram Hillary through and suppress Bernie, and if he had gotten it, he probably would have beaten Trump in 2016, and he would have had the 3 picks in the Supreme Court.
Right.
People need to remember that, man. That like the Democratic leadership totally fucked their own party, and they're doing it again.
Right. I'm not against you. Okay. So first of all, slow down.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
I'm gonna have a sip of water.
But maybe you should have 7.
Okay.
Just go do a lap. Joey and I can pick it up. Joey, do you like the Backstreet Boys? We'll talk about it.
He doesn't like being on camera.
You don't know. Joey and I are starting our own podcast.
It's just you solo with him engineering it.
It'd be great. Coming out of spring 2021. Okay. Back on track of there are major problems with both sides.
Yes.
And you also have to remember, which is what I always keep saying, which is it really only one being violent or one being for good.
Yeah.
It's only based on what is your experience. If you're a poor black person or brown person in this country right now, or an immigrant, or your parents are working immigrants or something like that, yes, somebody voting for Trump is violence against your life, because people are apt to get ripped at. Let me finish.
Okay.
Are apt to get, their their immigration revoked and pulled and deported, or like he's inciting violence against black people or whatever it is.
Where? What? Okay, so the immigration one, yes, Trump and the Republican base is much tougher on immigration than the Democrats.
You don't think that Trump has racist rhetoric?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, what is Trump doing to specifically target black people in America?
He's inciting. All of his behavior is about inciting. He's a showman. All he wants to do. I don't think that he has any
I don't disagree with
gauge
the
of
showman gate. I don't disagree with the showman part, but I think it's a little bit. I'm not saying that Trump isn't problematic and that his also, you got to remember too that like the people who go to these Trump rallies, we have met folks who are like hardcore Trumpers. There's not a political bone in their body. They just like that guy because they're sick of being mocked for being lower income, lesser educated.
Right. Yeah, I understand. But what I'm saying is that I think that it falls somewhat much more in the middle. I feel like you're taking this stance of like, that's so hyperbolic. I can't believe somebody would say something like that. And it's like, again, your life is not affected. So to you.
I understand that. I'm just, okay.
So to you, it would make sense that it seems incredibly hyperbolic because there isn't much on the line for you and I, right? And so I'm also not saying, listen, I did not post a single thing being like, vote like Biden, like Kamala, like, nah, I'm angry. I'm angry about that. I'm really angry about it. And, it's like, and the reality is even if Biden and Kamala do take over, it's like, I think there's some of the craziness will subside a little bit, which like, I'm really, really looking forward to. And I certainly, let me be clear. Alex Ketlin.
Shout out to my other podcast. By the way, my dad says maybe both parties are like crime syndicates. Yes, I 100% agree with you. Sorry, keep going. I'm just looking at all our comments.
Yeah, no. I mean, I agree. I mean, we've had a lot of political discussions with your dad, and I've heard you guys have discussions, and like, and obviously he's lived through like incredibly interesting times, even more than us, and. It's more so, I mean, again, I feel like the people that are actually, now I'm going on to something else, but like the people that really are looking for the truth they're always going to be the outliers. It's always going to be AOC. It's always going to be Bernie. It's always going to be, I'm sure there's some also on the Republican side, conservatives. I'm just not as well versed with the fringe of the Republican Party. Right. But, it's like, there are people, but it's like the people who get to the top, you get to the top because you said yes to so many people.
Right.
And again, and like my biggest thing is like, I have such issue with like the incarceration rate of black and brown people and like that, we see them as like, I know. So I'm getting there, which is like, that's why I have all this issue with Kamala. And then it was like this conflicting thing because people, even some huge supporters of Black Lives Matter were like, don't take this as an opportunity to like knock down a black woman because of
Kamala Harris?
Yeah. Well, because people were obviously going after her being like, wait a minute, she's like incarcerated all of these people and like we're bringing up her voting record and all of that, which was valid. But then other people were like, okay, but don't use that as an opportunity to like tear down a black woman. And I still haven't sorted out my feelings with that. I mean, I'm even slightly uncomfortable speaking about it here simply because I'd like to be really educated about it first before saying anything. But it was still like, it's frustrating of like, I mean, on a global scale, it's fantastic to see, a woman of color in that position, or a woman in general in that position, and a woman who like has actually done the work. You know what I mean? Like she for sure, like as far as resume, like deserves that job. But it's the confliction of like being told one thing of like, oh, this is what I'm for, and it's like, not according to all of the choices you've made.
I mean, listen, you've heard me go on and on about the problems with Kamala Harris. And again, I'm not saying that Biden-Harris winning isn't a better option.
It's for sure a better option. I want to make sure I'm screaming that.
Hold on. I'm going to throw a scenario at you and just ruminate on it for a second, right? Because there's a lot of people.
This is exhausting.
What? You just ranted for like 20 minutes.
I know. That's why I'm tired.
Okay. Well,
I'm listening. Go ahead. You're throwing a scenario at me.
Listen, 2016, Bernie was and Bernie's way more progressive than me. Like a lot of his platforms, I don't actually agree with on like the specifics of them. But Bernie, like who he is as a leader, as a man, as a politician, I'm like, I like that guy. I believe in him. I don't give a fuck if I don't agree with his policies. I trust what he says. His intentions are good. He can get my vote, right? And the Democrat leadership, who is completely controlled by Wall Street and military industrial complex interests, obviously pushed Bernie out. They didn't want him in there. Same way they pushed out Tulsi.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, she didn't have a shot to begin with.
I understand that. But like even when she was getting a hint of momentum, they shut her down because she immediately wanted to end all the regime change wars. My point is, again, with someone like AOC, right? Like you brought up, which is I didn't think about this, but you were right. She's very smart how she's doing this because she could have come in guns a-blazing, gotten cocky, being like, I'm the new face, but she's playing the long game here. She's doing it smart. So my only point is, though, every time it seems like there's like an outlier who's going to like flip the party the way Trump flipped the Republicans, different, but you get the idea here. The leadership and the Democrats shut it down. My theory is, though, even though Trump for 4 more years, yes, that would suck for a lot of reasons, it might be like if there's a silver, I'm just throwing this out as like if you're pissed if Trump wins again, here's a silver lining, right? This might finally be, all right, Democrats, you blew it 8 years in a row. 2 elections, you blew it. You got to go the other direction now. Like enough with this like same old names that we don't trust, like Biden, Clinton, whoever. Get those people out. Bring in fresh blood. Bring in somebody that people are excited about.
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Well,
because I don't think they're that smart. Because if they were, they would have done something different a long time ago. I mean, that's my thing of like when people are, because I don't come to things from a place of policy, of politics. I come to the world from a place of humanitarianism and what is actually right.
Sure.
Because then I always tell people, I'm like, luckily because I've been blessed through comedy and stuff like that of being able to travel all over the country. I also have family that sit in very different socioeconomic places in the world, right? And so I see a lot of people up close with very, very different experiences.
Yeah.
And it's like I think a lot of people that sit on one side or the other have only seen their side, which is why I
understand that. But
I'm just explaining right now.
Okay.
I'm talking to more people than just you right now, okay? And so
we got all our people chiming in live. Casey still wrote in all caps, but what does he look like?
It's a good bit. It's a good bit.
Also, my friend Chris Brown, he's like roasting me on the comments right now.
That's amazing.
He wrote, the only thing progressive about Alex is his hair loss.
Also, Chris Brown, how difficult is it to have? Well, probably now it's easier. How hard was it to be Chris Brown in like 2008?
Well, I knew him as CJ. So I guess his middle name is a J. So when I met him, he's a Boston comic. Okay. And I knew him as he had a whole bit about that.
Okay,
like,
yeah, you would have to. It was like Michael Bolton.
Right. Yeah. But anyway, all right. So thank you, Chris, for roasting me. That was very funny. All right, back to the thing you were saying.
I lost my train of thought. I'm just saying that I come to.
So let me.
But wait, what I'm saying is that I come to the world obviously as an empathic wellness witch. So I'm always looking out for like what is actually good for. You know what I mean? Self-identified. Right. What is actually good for people?
Right.
Not for institutions, not for any of those things. What do people actually need? But the reason why, there's not a lot of us actually saying that is because there's no momentum behind it. It's also like I understand that I live on planet Earth and I understand that most humans don't have the capacity for that type of empathy or that understanding, or they have their own lives and whatever.
Sure.
And they just want somebody to make the choice. But it is an incredibly slippery slope to just assume that if it's Democrat, then it's good. Because that's not true. It's not true. And it's also you're not demanding more of your party.
Right.
And that's how I feel. That's where my anger comes in from of like, no, man, it's like we can both say we're proud that Kamala's in a position to potentially run the country, that we're proud that a woman is in that position.
Yeah.
While also saying, hey, you got to come to the mat here. Because you're telling us one thing and you're doing another thing. So if you want to make us proud, then you better prove it. Rather than saying it's this, the cancel culture of it has to be one or the other of like, if you're not with her, then you're against her. No,
that's
what
insane.
I should be. No, I know that you know that, but I'm just expressing where it's like, that's so much of why, we can do all of this blaming. And I know you're on the same page with me on this of like all this blaming of media and social media and algorithms and blah, 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 and CNN and Fox News and all that bullshit. But at the same time, it's like, it's also on us.
Yeah.
We have to start doing a little bit of critical thinking and asking other people to do that. The amount of political memes or this or that have slowed for me significantly that I post, only because I'm like, if I don't know exactly where that came from or I don't really think it through, like just this very quick posting of things, it's like we're just accepting things at such a rate.
But that's why everybody's, because the thing is, most people like you and I mean, I'm more politically invested, I suppose, in the nuances of things than you are. But I still am not like I'll retweet stuff, but I'm not like this and this and that was my bigger point with the folks who post something like. Because it's what when they make a post, like, just remember, if you vote for Trump, it's an act of violence against your like LGBT friends or whatever the sentence was they write. It's very performative, is what I'm getting at here, right? Like, that's not, nobody reads that and stops and thinks, oh, that was a really well thought out, rational way to convince me to maybe look at the other side. It's just like anger spewing. It's not doing anything to help the dialogue. And that's, in this country, we have to learn to lose and win gracefully. Nobody's doing that on either side. It's all about like owning the other side. Oh, look, we just exposed Trump for his tax fraud. We just exposed Ilhan Omar for ballot harvesting. Like all these, it's just this game of like, gotcha. And then people like me are like, dude, this just proves they're all fucking assholes. They're all corrupt. That's why the only thing I've leaned more towards is libertarian. And I know that party has its own problems, but it's just taking away power from the government. That's the bigger issue people keep missing. Is like everybody's mad right now on the liberal side and the Democrat side, right, about Trump's Supreme Court pick. I get it. You're mad, right? But what you really should be mad at is this whole system that makes it where, like, if your guy isn't in charge, you are so terrified. That's the problem, because half of this country is always going to be furious if we keep this system at the rate that it's at. That's not you can't survive that way.
Right. But it's also, again, which I've said, and I'm like still working on my stand-up bits about it, because I refuse to go back to the stage with any sort of COVID joke. I refuse. And I also want to do new material. This is kind of talking about something different. But where I was talking about, I'm working on those bits about the founding fathers.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
When you guys hear it, it's great.
And so, working on some content about that. But it is where it's like, a two-party system worked when you had 7 colonies.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? I mean, that's the thing. It's like, what this idea of like, cognitive reasoning, like, and I know I've said this on the podcast before, but I got so annoyed with my very intelligent friends that are liberal and good meaning, where it was like, well, women should run the country because the woman in New Zealand who shut down COVID.
You know what?
And I'm like, New Zealand has like 7 million people. Or whatever it is. I know the stats aren't correct, but the feeling is still real. Okay.
Let me tell you something.
Well, let me finish. Okay. I'm just saying where it's like, yeah, California has 40 million people. 40 million. Do you understand? So it's like, the comparisons like that, I'm like, are weak. They don't hold water. And then you have all the more reason for people to come after you. It's like from the other side. And it's like, rather than just going, hey, maybe we can all think about creating like a better system and like actually demanding more from people. And, there's also, I don't want to, also seem like I'm shitting on all of my liberal left-leaning friends, because I'm also of that group, but meaning, because there are a lot of people and there's a lot of folks that are doing a lot of the work and it's not performative. I mean, I've got 5 or 6 email chains. I mean, people are sending me so much of where you can help and what you can do that I can't even keep up,
right.
Of like things to sign and places to go. So there is a lot of action. There really is, of people that do want more and aren't like, learn my pronouns or die, right? There are,
right.
But I'm just saying that it's like, I also need to speak up for those folks as well. Like, there are people who are just like, hey, like, I'm a queer person of color and like, I matter too. And I'm scared that, Trump is going to continue to take away all of my rights. That's very scary and that's very real.
But listen, I think there's a misconception here that he's like gunning to take what rights are being. I'm not talking about Roe v. Wade. That's a separate thing. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of actual hard momentum to flip that from the Supreme Court. But I at least can appreciate, yeah, that's a concern with the 6-3 conservative court. I understand, but like, what right? He's not going to overturn gay marriage. He's not going to. I don't understand. Like, I get that the Republican Party historically is not so friendly to LGBT plus people, but it's the same way it's like this narrative from the media that like Trump and Trump's base is like gunning to like commit hate crimes. And I'm not defending Trump. I'm not defending actual racism.
Well,
but like
I know,
it's misconstruing the real problem.
I mean, that's true and that's not true because I mean, that was like, I mean, again, he's done that where it was like all of the white folks that showed up with those machine guns and it was like, oh, that's fine. But then if, you know, black people are angry that like we're still not paying attention to them after how many years.
Right.
And that, you know what I mean? And then it's like, oh, they're a bunch of hoodlums. They're this, they're that. And like throwing all these names around and being like, they don't respect anything. Like they're violent. They're this. So it's like, that is saying that what the white people did is okay. These are general statements. But what I'm saying is the optics of it is that is okay. This is not okay. Right. This is good. That is bad.
But I blame the media narrative on that way more than I blame the political leadership simply because... So this is one of those scenarios where you can go chicken or egg, which is first, right? So you go back to when I think it was in Michigan, I believe, where there were those people who were protesting at the State House. They were mostly white with the rifles, right? People were like, see, nobody bothered them, so it's white privilege, which there is for sure some truth to that. I'm not taking away from that. But it's not that simple because there also wasn't like mobs of people destroying stuff. Now, you can pick that apart in a few ways. Why was that the case? Was it that nobody egged them on? They didn't feel like they had to go destroy things? But like the fact of the matter is, like one of those protests had people not destroying. They were there with guns, which seems ridiculous. Like, why do you bring your rifle? But whatever. They were just standing there. And another one had people like smashing in windows and cars. And
sure, but also the white people were not instigated. I mean, that's
my point, though. It's chicken or egg. It's like you can go in circles.
Right, I know. But I'm saying that because we're not looking at it, we're not looking at these puzzle pieces from all of the sides, that's where these generalizations are also coming from. And, you know, and it's also, I don't know. I think that the fact that we have a president who has not acknowledged we have a major racial divide and we need to fix this.
Yeah.
The things that you ignore are the things that you're saying okay to. And that I do believe. I believe that from a spiritual standpoint. The things that you were unwilling to say, this is an issue.
I understand that.
You're saying is okay.
And Trump is a dirtbag. Real quick, I love all the comments you guys are sending in. Please keep posting them. I can't respond to all of them because this is...
Oh, well, then that means we're doing something good if people are responding.
But Chris Brown just wanted to... his point was demonstrating with legal firearms is different than and literally throwing Molotov cocktails is insanely different. I agree with you. And then Helga, our friend Helga Purnell, she goes, the media is emotional. I think, emotional eating the food Trump offers. And she's right. Look, this is my bigger point, though. This is what I've been saying over and over again, is that the system we have now, the way it's set up, we have created a world where half of the country feels like their life is in jeopardy if their person doesn't win. That is a terrible way to run the country. I mean, I know we're looking at like November right now, but when you step back and think about that, this is a system that can't continue. We cannot live in this country where half of us feel like if the other person gets voted in, their life is over. It's just, we're like in a speedboat heading towards an iceberg, and nobody's like, well, you know, it's like hopefully our guy gets it and he'll fix it. And it's just so wrong. Do you see what I'm saying here? Like,
yeah, sorry, you said Speed, and then I remembered that I did actually watch Speed in a hotel room over the weekend and realized that, like, when Keanu was in his prime, he was pretty hot.
All right. Well, I want to...
No, I all of those things are true. Keanu Reeves was a babe. But can I respond to what you just said?
Please.
With that Mack truck coming towards me of emotions.
Yeah.
But I also, that's why going to, again, a little bit of like a mental health and spiritual standpoint, the other reason that we got to this place, I mean, again, you want to talk about looking at something from multiple sides of the coin.
Yep.
It's not even just as simple as like, well...
Great name for our new podcast, maybe multiple sides of the coin. Too many syllables.
Well, that's right. I was trying to figure out something of like two sides of the coin. That was one I was trying. Yeah. There's a bunch because it's... Anyway, that... We don't teach people even how to deal with their own emotions. There are people that are yelling and screaming and that are angry, and they don't even know why they're angry.
Well, I can tell you why. Because...
No, but I'm not even saying about politics.
Oh, right, yeah.
That I'm saying there's not even any self-policing of people. We don't even teach people awareness of that. I mean, that's why, like, let's just even narrow in on COVID.
Sure.
And, but I also think it's like, it's this unwillingness to be okay to disagree with people and then still be able to be civil.
Well,
because there's still plenty of people. I mean, I inadvertently walked into a conversation over the weekend that I did not mean to. And they were like,
let's hear about it.
Well, no, I mean, it was basically just the end of it where it was, somebody was like, well, I know some black people that I worked with and they don't think that anything's wrong. So like, I don't think racism's real.
God,
But what I'm saying is, and like, I will go toe to toe with anybody of like, we still live in a very racist country. Now, racism, that doesn't mean that that everyone is blatantly hateful.
Right.
That means that it is something that we don't talk about. We don't educate. We celebrate MLK Day and then we're like, everybody's torn on Black Lives Matter. And then that's where we're like, well, that's race. Come back next week. Like, we're not even, people are so scared. Yeah. Everybody's so scared to even go, oh, maybe my experience isn't the binary experience. Like, why is everybody, and we don't even have to talk about racism because I know there's a lot of people who watch this podcast that do not agree with me, and that's fine. But
I got you guys. Don't worry.
But I'm saying, I mean, whatever.
No,
like,
I know what you're
saying.
Beat
it. It's real, so get over it. But
I'm not, okay.
I know, but I'm just saying that I'm not coming for you. I'm just saying.
Well, you're not coming for me.
Well, we're getting married. So, just to remind everybody, in case they have forgotten, we are actually getting married.
We're very much in love. We have intense discussions. That's the whole point of this podcast.
But it's good, and that's what people should be doing.
Our kids are going to be so we're going to be like on road trips talking about, something with like the Green New Deal or some shit about how it's like, you're going to be like, no, we need it. I'm like, I know we need it, but we're killing jobs. And our kids are like, Mom, Dad, shut up.
I know. Well, whatever. Everybody's got to go to therapy because of their parents.
Well,
but I
have to say, this clown Chris Brown goes, well, I'm a racist and I agree with Rachel wholeheartedly.
Oh my God. Well, I'm saying that I think that there is also something of like individualism where it's like we are so scared to pay attention to ourselves. Why do we think these things that we do? Why do we think that, right? Sure. Like, I mean, changing, especially folks that are rooted in faith of any, it is really terrifying to actually question your own faith, which I think everybody should do.
Sure.
Whether you're atheist or not or whatever, like, if you really lean on your faith, you should be able to question it. You should talk about it. This idea of like, well, you just trust no matter what. It's like, no, you got to learn what it is. And then you lean into it with everything you have.
I agree with you, but by your own logic, every time something annoying, bad, or frustrating happens to you or us, you're always like, what is the universe telling me? What is the message? What is the point of this universe? I've seen you have this. And I'm not shitting on it.
Right, but isn't that exactly what I just said?
Well, I guess what I mean is like you're assuming the universe has a plan. Like I'm like, there is no plan. The universe just exists. It's random, and you do things because you do them. And like, to me, like I don't live in a world where I believe that like the universe. If a kid gets cancer and dies, fuck that. If there's a plan that made that happen, I don't want to be part of it. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then people are like, oh, but like God works in mysterious ways. That's fine.
Well, people say that because it's a way to cope.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I don't think that. Well, that's going into a totally different thing, and I don't want to talk about children passing away of terminal illnesses because that's certainly not how I want to end today.
Now let's go back to racism and the Civil War.
Let's do it. Just really easy, stuff that two white people are super equipped to break down. But
have you heard the term ADOS? Have you heard this term?
Yes. I'm not familiar though.
So it stands for American Descendant of Slavery.
Okay.
And it's a term I heard. It was an intellectual who brought this up on a podcast. I forget who, but someone of.
Wait, I wanted to finish talking about faith before we went back to yeah.
Okay, sure.
That also the way in which I view the universe, I don't believe that there's like this plan and it's like everything that happens. I mean, I believe that like life is choose your own adventure. Why are you laughing?
Just this comment he wrote.
What, is this CJ again? Chris Brown?
God damn it, CJ. He wrote, Rachel looks like she plays the ukulele and Alex looks like he burns crosses.
Okay. First of all, I've never been so offended that I'm the ukulele girl. But Alex looks like he burns crosses. Do we just have a new troll now? Is that what happened?
Yeah, no, CJ's funny. I know CJ. He has his own podcast.
I know. I'm just giving him a hard time, dude. It's fine. I mean, listen, anybody whose name is Chris Brown, like he's heard it. You know what I mean? Like it's like, dude, you've earned it. You know what I mean? But talking about faith, I think that what I mean more of like in this reference I was referring to, because a lot of times in faith you have very conservative values, right? And I think it's important for people to stop and think about why they believe those things.
Sure.
And what is the repercussion of that belief? And what is their expansion of that belief? And do they choose to take the Bible, or any religious text as is? Or is there any, like, what is the adaptation of that, of like, now you're living in 2020?
Right.
Like there's just a lot of that's interesting. But that even goes into, there is a really great documentary I know I've talked about on this podcast before, but it's called Surviving Progress. And it's probably incredibly antiquated by this point. I think it only came out in like 2016 or something, maybe long before that. But anyway, sometime in this decade or in this past decade, but it's all about what is positive versus negative progress. That as a society, we have progressed more in like 10 years than we did in like over 100 years. And there's negative consequences because of that. And, we are seeing ourselves like, mutate and change based off of our surroundings, based off of technology, based off of all of these things. And so it's like, all of those things even play into this, digital virtual reality that we're all living in. Sure. I mean, that's what's so funny to me when people talk about VR and they're like, is it going to catch on? I'm like, are you on your phone right now? VR has caught on. You know what I mean? Know. We are all living in our own projection to the world of what we want it to be. We're already here, friends. Like,
it's really true. And I think it's only going to get worse. Maybe worse isn't the right word, but I think it's only going to get more intense because...
Well, we'll also get more conditioned to it.
We'll get more conditioned to it, but we're already living in a world where there isn't objective truth anymore, right? Now, I know that to you and me there is, but there's like huge swaths of the American public that like just do not believe or do hardcore believe in certain things, and there's no middle ground. I mean, even some, like abortion's a great example that like some people, a huge portion of people in this country feel like it is 100% a woman's right to have autonomy over her body, no matter what. And another faction, huge, that thinks that at any point from conception on, it's murdering a baby. And there's just no way to have. How do you?
There's also some things that's a life or death thing, and that's a faith thing. I mean, again, that is something that we will never all agree on, because then that's also, I mean, pro-life, pro-choice. That is a pinnacle divide between the left and the right.
You know what's funny?
So that is something that it's also bullshit, because it's like they also want that to be a ball that they can pass back and forth, because they lose that ball. Everybody decides like, okay, this is what it is. Or like, there is a separation between church and state. 90% of the fight for the Republican Party falls off. At least the way that the Republican Party is right now.
Funny thing,
I mean, the rise of like the evangelical, which again, that's a totally different, conversation for a different day. But like, it's insane.
Well, the funny thing is, to me,
how are the angles on those photos, Joey?
He's taking pics for the gram, but you're still not going to see him on camera. Sorry, Casey. The thing to me that's funny is the way they always throw that card out, because nobody who actually pulls the strings in these parties gives a shit about abortion. Nobody's taxes change. Nobody's profits change.
But that's exactly why. And half of those people paid for abortions, which is like,
dude, Trump's for sure paid for like 10 abortions.
But that's why that's where my real anger comes from, because there are people who, like friends and family of mine, who genuinely from a place of faith believe that it's murdering a child, and believe that if somebody gets pregnant that it's, and I don't agree, but that is their belief, and their belief is not political. Their belief is like solely based in a place of like faith, and they really believe that that's the right choice. And it's like, who am I to tell them I feel like that they're wrong? I mean, there are some things that are just going to be a stalemate. I mean, people are complicated.
Yeah, in this country, as far as I see, it's that, guns, and immigration to an extent are the three issues, but mostly guns and abortion are the two that like people who have people don't budge. I mean, I'm torn on both of those, by the way, but like my attitude is like, I don't really have a vested fight in either of these, so I'm out. Like the things I care about.
Well, my only thing is like, great, if you're on the side that's saying that we need to get rid of abortions, then like I would want some like, I want to know you haven't paid for one. You haven't snuck one in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
Like, that's my thing. But my other thing.
How would you prove that?
Well, I don't know. That's where I was like, I had to stop myself because I was like, I don't even know where that thought's going. But do you know what I mean? Whatever the way is to verify that, right?
I understand.
Then that's what I would want. I'd be like, great, then it's fair game. Put it on the ballot. But otherwise, like, shut the fuck up and sit down.
And the funny thing to me is that, like, and I'm not the first person to bring this up, obviously, but like the Republican leadership always wants to get rid of abortion, but then they also want to get rid of all the social programs.
But that's the other thing I was going to say, which that's also where my other anger comes from. You don't get to pick and choose. But it's the same. And we talk about that all the time of the hypocrisy of both parties, where it was like, again, where like, on the left, where it was like, they want everybody to own up to everything all the time and be honest, which I think they should. But then Kamala comes along and it's like, well, let's not shit on a black woman. It's like, whoa, wait a minute.
So let me go back to that other.
You don't get to pick sides. So that is why I get the most angry about the. I don't think about the individual who is pro-life.
Sure.
Because again, I know a lot of these folks, and they're like, their churches donate to different social programs or this or that, or trying to create more of a life for children, right?
Right.
Or even like
But the bigger issue that I see, that I was talking about, and this brings me back to my point of like we need to learn how to win and lose gracefully in this country, and really let's learn how to have like civil discourse again, is that people who identify with one party or one side, right? They only look to the most sensationalized, ridiculous examples of their opponent, for lack of a better word, right? So people who are on the conservative side, they see these Antifa idiots who are going out in these protests with like, paintball gear and throwing Molotov cocktails. Okay, that's a real problem, but that's obviously not the whole of the movement. And vice versa, right? You see there are, for sure, in this country, racist, ignorant, just nasty people, right? But that's not, like, there are a lot of people who happen to lean conservative who want nothing to do with that. The same way, and that's what makes me so angry, is like, what I see the most of is we hold these different groups to different standards. A lot of police will say things where it's like, it's a few bad cops, but then they'll see like people at protests smashing stuff, but you got to do the same. Right. You can't be part of like the BLM movement and then say all cops are bad. You can't, it doesn't work, man.
Right. But I agree. And that is where I think our biggest divide is that people, again,
as a nation.
Right. Because but that also goes back to ego, that people are unwilling to actually have a conversation.
Sure.
And it is where every time I've had a conversation with people, even when we get into it sometimes, and you'll be like, yeah, but, right? And I know I do it too, but I'm just saying, where it's like, you want to nail me to the wall on something, right? And I know that's when, did you see him wink? Where I was like, it's there. But I remember when I talked about that reach around earlier? Anyway.
This is not that kind of podcast.
Hey, it was a callback. Okay. Comedy.
But just as an example, like we met some folks not too long ago. We didn't talk about politics, but we met them at a group event thing, and they wore Trump gear head to toe. And they were actually quite lovely. We didn't talk about politics. We didn't get into any of that. And they were just like human to human, just enjoying a campfire. They were great.
Yeah.
And it's like that, we got to get back to that. We have to get back to a world where we just don't give a shit that somebody might fundamentally disagree with us on a lot of stuff, but they're still a human. We can still be like human to human civil. And again, that's my bigger point, is we've made the government so powerful that everybody's, and it's been sensationalized by the mainstream media and extremist media too, to put us in this world that we feel like I'm not saying that there isn't a lot of reason to be worried if you're of certain groups, if Trump stays in power or vice versa with, whatever. But the bigger issue that I really want people to understand here is that this problem is not going to go away. No matter who wins in November, the other side's not going to be like, all right, well, we gave it our best. Like, that's how I felt up until 2016. And after 2016, it's for me, in my lifetime, I remember a little bit of Clinton, but mostly Bush, Obama, 2016. Every election before, it was like, we tried, didn't work out. Damn, all right, we got to get back at it. Let's organize, let's rally, let's figure this thing out in 4 years. And now it's like, if we don't get what we want, we're going to burn it to the ground. And it's like, dude, what are you talking about?
Right, but that was also who incited that.
Both sides. I'm not going to.
You're wrong. I'm not. First of all, fuck off. No, I'm not wrong.
It's both, dude. It's both.
I'm not saying that it's not both. But I also will stand here and say, if you do not believe that we can pinpoint a lot of that back and put the majority of the onus of that onto Trump, I vehemently disagree with you.
Yes,
I'm not.
Is a huge problem.
Yes,
but
and so I'm not. And I apologize for saying fuck off. I'm heated in the moment.
Well,
but we don't even. I know we don't even like cursing. But obviously, I know that I love you and whatever. But do you know what I mean?
I love you too.
But I'm just saying. What a podcast! Look at Joey's giggling at us. We're like,
he likes it. Joey has fun.
I know, but I'm just saying. But that's also why I still think that these conversations in this podcast is important, because you should be able to have these conversations with people and get angry and teach each other things and rough each other up, and then go, all right, good game, and move on. But
exactly.
I just let me finish that point. And again, we clearly just this is where we divide on it, and that's okay. But I also think to say that that a lot of this divide did not. I mean, there was a little of it there was the starting of it with I can see Russia from my house.
Oh,
with
Sarah Palin.
Yeah, I mean, that was
a mistake. Yeah.
But I know, but I'm saying we're starting to see that of like sensationalism, because she did not deserve that job. I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with her. She's a lovely woman, and raised a family and all those good things.
Not qualified enough.
But not qualified.
Yeah.
Like we all can be, you know what
that.
I mean? And so I think that was kind of the start of this, like, what is happening kind of thing. So it was already percolating.
Yeah.
There was already so much momentum that happened for, I think, Black people and Black culture with Obama.
Sure.
And that there was probably a lot of people that were really frustrated by that for one reason or the other, or people just that didn't agree with his politics, right? And so I think it was a lot of things. And I also think, guys, we haven't even talked about COVID. I mean, remembering that also it's like that layered on top of all of this, that everybody has had to be at home, but the news hasn't stopped. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's amazing that everybody's doing this well.
Well, the other issue with the COVID stuff is again, Trump's totally at fault. So was everybody else. And again, he blew it, but every other state did too. There's no real consistency. There's no consistency. I mean, even what we
There's no moral compass.
Well, think about what we saw earlier today at the Comedy Store. They were doing outdoor socially distanced shows in their parking lot. And then I'm going to pull this up because this is infuriating. My dad goes, "Did Rachel forget to meditate today?"
I did work out. I had quite a workout.
I want to pull this up because this to me is like indicative of just the insanity going on right now. Okay, so the Comedy Store, which is the biggest comedy club, arguably in the world, but it's definitely one of the biggest here in LA. So they, where is this?
When you look for it also. So they had been, again, the Comedy Store is, renowned. Everybody knows it. And they had been closed for a very long time. And obviously they employ a lot of really great people, not only the comics that are there, but all of the staff, the door guys, everything, right? It's an LA institution. They employ a lot of really great people. So they had started to do some social distancing shows outside.
Outside, social distance, totally safe. And some asshole complained to the health department that it was somehow spreading COVID. And then so the Comedy Store basically said that they've been notified by the LA County Health Department that outdoor live entertainment is not allowed. Even though the city of West Hollywood approved it, the LA County Health Board shut it down. And they wrote, "If you feel the way we do about the importance of bringing back stand-up comedy, please email the LA County Supervisor, Sheila Kuel," whatever you say her name is. And I just want to say, Sheila, I hope you lose your job. You're terrible at it. No one respects you. If I could vote you out of office, I would spend so much money.
Whoa. Why is it her fault? Chill out. Why is it her fault? That's her job and we have to email her?
Because
she's just doing her job.
Okay, fine. Sheila, in the general sense, whoever made this call,
the person who made the call, maybe you can direct that anger at them. But Sheila's just trying to do her job.
Okay,
I mean, she could still suck. You know what I mean? Like Sheila, I don't know you.
I'll peel it back. You're right. That's fair. I haven't done the research if Sheila's at fault here. My bigger point, who I'm really upset with, is this government oversight that does nothing to help anybody. And you're saying, okay, so wait a minute. So like, we can't have outdoor socially distanced comedy shows, but we're allowing people to like do so many other things, like fly in airplanes and shop at the grocery store.
But that is one thing where, like, out of all of this, I've had to accept what are my negotiables and what are the ones I'm just going to go, yeah, it doesn't make sense. And what I've decided are the things that I'm like, it doesn't make sense, are those I don't know why I was going to say bull crap. I already said the F word on here multiple times. Just like bullshit rules where it's like, okay, so Los Angeles County says one thing, but then West Hollywood says another, and then like the conflicting, or like that people lost their jobs because their restaurants closed, but then you can be open outside, but that like it's just all
hey, LA County Health Code or Health Board, wherever you are, why don't you deal with the fucking homelessness problem here where people are literally living in squalor? There's like 70,000 homeless people living on the streets of LA. They're spreading disease like crazy, and you care about outdoor comedy shows? Get your fucking priorities straight.
Well, calm down.
I know there's a lot of cursing this day. I'm sorry. I'm just
this day. There's so much cursing this day.
This episode. This is an R-rated episode. I'm sorry. I'm just worked up.
No, it's okay. It's okay, man. The world's on fire. And I've been gone.
Our state literally is a new fire started in California.
Oh God. Well, here's what I'll say is I also don't think it's fair to say. I mean, listen, there are Karens everywhere. You know what I mean? So.
Yes.
So, and those people exist. We know those people. They're the contrarians. They love, you know what I mean? That's their identity. And for those folks, it's like, whatever. There is a certain level of like, the social justice warriors versus, the Tommy Laurens of the world versus like, there are some that are just going to piss us off no matter what side you sit on. Right. Sure. And so to a certain extent, you got to pick and choose, I think, as we continue to move through this, how much energy you're going to give to it.
You're right.
And so what I want to say on what you were saying just now is, a lot of those people are just doing their job. I mean, do I think there's some people in public health who are wanting to be political or this or that? Sure. But I also think a lot of what happened and why this mess of COVID has gotten so ridiculous is what it's really done, along with everything else, is it's exposed the weakness of the entire thread that is our set up society of like, hospitals to insurance, and then your insurance is tied to your job, and then your job is then dictated right now on like the health codes, but the health codes are different from city to city. And then if somebody has enough money, then they can supersede those health codes. And then like, it's all tied together. But nobody knows who's leading. I mean, like you were talking about earlier, it's like chicken or egg. I mean, Again, I was on a plane this weekend, and I'm grateful to say that I felt very safe. I mean, for the most part, and
Was there anybody in the airport or on the plane that seemed kind of like, this is scary?
There were a few people that like. I mean, here's the other thing about COVID is it also revealed there's a difference between people that are much more. A little bit of paranoia around it, and I respect that because they could be right, and people just don't want to get sick, man. I get it. But what I found the most interesting is 90% of people just had the mask on, did a little bit of hand sanitizer, kept to themselves, and kept it moving. So I was like, so actually the majority of us, I mean, I was only in the Detroit airport, the Cleveland airport, and LAX, right? Yeah. But so not vastly different places, but for the most part, it seems like everybody was on the same page. People are waiting in line to get their Big Mac. They're going to get their
that's going to kill you faster than COVID.
Well, yeah, but like their M&Ms and their magazine or whatever, and it really felt like completely normal.
Yeah.
And frankly, I don't want it to go back another way when it comes to airports because you didn't have to sit next to anybody. It was great.
Oh, that was
on the airplanes. It was great.
On Delta?
Oh, yeah, it was great.
Thanks, Delta.
It was the best flying experience I had.
Well, to me, what's funny? On the drive over here, we saw someone in traffic next to us, and she had on gloves, the mask on her chin, and she was smoking a cigarette. And I'm just looking at this lady. I'm thinking, like, if you're smoking the cigarette, like, why even bother with the other health precautions?
I mean, but it's also, that's also one where I'm like, good for you. You know what I mean? You're trying. Well, the last thing I'll say on that, which is also the amount of people that I've seen that aren't properly wearing their masks, right?
Like the nose is out or something?
Yeah. And that's the best for me because it also just proves, again, I mean, listen, I do ultimately think that everybody wants people to be healthy and safe. Even if you believe that, like, this is all overblown, or you're still like, people shouldn't be out, you're angry at Alex and I for being here, in a room with Joey and close proximity, whatever it is, right? Everybody has their own opinions. But I do think ultimately that everybody wants everybody to be healthy. I do believe that. But I thought that was so funny. I'm like, dude, the amount of people that aren't even doing this correctly. The other thing I thought was very funny is when I've been in areas that are slightly more dangerous. And then
what do you mean by dangerous?
So my mom is from the east side of Cleveland, which is very
like
gang related,
high crime,
high crime.
Okay. For some reason, I thought you meant like more COVID dangerous.
Oh no, a lot of gangs, a lot of heavy violence and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But seeing these well, I don't want to say they're gangbangers because I don't know. But
folks.
There was 2 houses across the street from my grandma that the cops were there because like I guess they've been busted for drugs like over and over again, whatever. And this is also just totally normal for my like old grandparents. Like they're like, well, we've been in this neighborhood since the 60s. This is what it is now. And then like 2 blocks over, it's being like totally gentrified. So it's just like that area of town. But like seeing these guys on their porch, which like they're scary dudes, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they had masks on, and there was something to me about that was like so. It reminded me of shout out to Chris Red, who used to have a bit. This is like so old now, but about being late to when he was like still participating. I don't know if he was really in a gang or what, but for the purposes of the joke, that he was like, you know, he would have to. He'd be late to the gang meetings because he was stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
You know, and like showing up, he's like, man, if I took a nap too long and I didn't get on, you know, the highway to get there, like that's embarrassing. So I just thought about that where I was like, it's kind of funny to see these guys who are like running drugs, but they're still like out talking to police officers with like masks on their face.
Yeah, that is funny.
Like that was still pretty funny, but
it's a funny mental image. Would be funnier. I
mean, it'd be funnier if, like, you know, that wasn't happening. That
course.
nobody had to endure that.
The funniest iteration of that to go like it's very un-PC. But if you saw like a suicide bomber with the mask on, like they still have like the vest and everything, but they're
well, it's funnier. Oh God. Oh, we're gonna get canceled before we even get started. But if he's like trying to make a declaration, I've also just already made it a man. But everyone's
listen,
like,
America.
Yeah, and he's like, you, and he's just like, you have 10 minutes. And everyone's like, how much time though? We can't hear you.
He's making the hostage video.
Yeah, and he's
we will bring death and fire to the what? We can't hear you.
We don't know. We want to help. We want to help, and they just can't.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway,
that's funny. It's a funny bit.
See, it's a comedy podcast too. It's not all serious. We got to wrap it up soon.
All right.
But I want to end on.
Do you want to do your highlights from today's conversations, and then? I think that's funny. I want to highlight again about when I told you to F off because I'm still feeling a little guilty about that.
That's okay. You can make it up to me later.
Whoa, Mr. Gatlin.
Oh, Lord. Okay, so no, actually, I want to end on a fun note because I want to give a shout out to my future mother-in-law, soon to be, Sue Painter, because
she was inducted into her high school Hall of Fame.
So tell us about it.
It was, I mean, what an experience. I mean, again, where I talk about, like, I forget how privileged our life really is in so many ways. And, like, you know, I'm always like, we don't have enough, you know, this yet. People don't know enough about this yet. And always chasing the next thing. And it was really slowing down and being like, even if this is as good as it gets, like,
look at this right here.
That's what I'm saying.
We're in a professional podcast studio.
I know, but that's what I'm saying. Where it was just a good reminder for me because I'm so ambitious and I've already been given so much throughout my life. So anyway, it was just a kind of a nice reminder of that. And then again, that nice reminder of like, not everybody lives the way you do, you know, like seeing these folks. So like I said, my mom grew up in a pretty rough neighborhood. And since she went back and opened up a painting studio that's in that neighborhood and it's free to go. And her whole thing is it's free. We just ask that people give back with time and talent because her biggest thing is a lot of the reason why there's violence that's incited in lower socioeconomic neighborhoods, specifically with Black and Brown, but her neighborhood is still mostly poor whites. But that it's because we're not instilling them with value,
right? And
that when people don't have value or purpose, it makes people angry. You know, like why would they try? People don't value me. They don't think I'm worth anything. So, you know.
I mean, it's, you know, to me, like I think about like, listen, I have 2 very successful parents and all of the people that are like their friends, acquaintances, and most of my family have all like done very well for themselves. So like, I can't really, it's hard for me to imagine what it would be like to grow up with like probably no dad, no one with a real career, everybody around using squalor. Yeah, of course, like you're going to turn to crime. Like what, like there's no one in your community to show you the way.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, yeah, we could go into a whole other thing for that.
Anyway, so the painting studio.
So that is my mom's very big thing with working with kids with, you know, less than desirable resources, which is we have to instill value. So even when people bring stuff to donate to the podcast, to the studio, like there was somebody that brought like some bags of dirty clothes, and she was like, "We can't accept these. You're welcome to have them dry cleaned and bring them back, but like again." We are about providing this community with value. Somebody brought a bunch of like expired cans and she's like, you're bringing these because you don't want them.
Right.
That's not what we're doing. We're not telling this community, oh, here are things that we don't want.
Sure.
You can have them. She's like,
Right.
that's not what we're here to do. What we're here to do is build value for these people in this community. So therefore they believe in themselves and go out there and achieve the things that they can with the resources that they have.
So the painting studio, because I thought your mom was getting inducted because she has like 7 medical degrees or something.
Well, that was also part of it.
Okay.
But so the reason that she was, so you can be nominated, I guess. So this, and so her kind of, mentor in a sense, Mr. Michael Bailey, who was her track coach. And he was the first person. My mom grew up very, very poor in somewhat of a disrupted household. And so Mr. Bailey offered my mom that sense of value and held her to a different standard. And that was kind of the first person
he nominated her.
Yeah, that offered her this different thing. And so, and Bailey's still, he's still a track coach. I think right now he said he's retired. He's like 70 some odd, and like just still, he's got a little gray in his beard. Other than that, like still look, I saw him and he's like, how are you? I'm like, how are you? You don't even look like you've aged. So anyway, Mr. Bailey, and he, has done so much for all of these communities. And so he nominated my mom, both with all of those things. And obviously, yes, so she has 7 degrees and she's a doctor.
Who got to introduce Sue at her?
And then no big deal, but y'all, Tracy Taylor. So Tracy got to make a little appearance. And let me tell you, these old people did not even know what was happening or
describe what so there was a program.
So there's literally this, like, I also thought that my mom is 58, I think. So like most of her friends.
She would be so mad if she knew you said that on air.
Well, she doesn't care. She'd be like, honey, I don't care. Okay. I just thought that you were talking about me. And so she, it's so true. She wears cowboy hats and like she's super cool and wears Converse. So anyway, she.
It's also not your mom's accent.
I know. That's just the voice I use for her. But anyway, she, so her and all of her friends are like super cool. Like they all grew up in the 70s. Like they're super chill. They're a really, really good group of people that I've grown up with, as going to visit there over and over again. And so, in all different walks of life, because, they all grew up in this rough neighborhood. So some of them are still rough around the edges. A few of them got out. So it's kind of a cool group of folks to be acquainted with. And, so anyway, I was assuming that everybody that was going to be going to this event was of like mind and or that age range. I didn't realize this is an event that they do every year, and you can people are inducted from every year that this school was open.
Right.
So there was a table of folks that went to school there in the 50s.
Oh my God.
Okay. And so
high school in the 50s.
Yes. So my mom's table, the table that I was there with,
they were probably like 80 years old.
Oh yeah, they were old. There was a gentleman who fell. It's not funny, but trust me, the story doesn't end sadly. There was an at the old table,
old table.
Well, let's just call it what it is. And
the white hairs
fell out of his chair.
Oh my God.
So of course everybody like rushes over because you're like, oh my God, this man is having a heart attack. He's dying. So I of course panic and turn around, and then, but then you just heard him go, the chair was slippery. So for whatever reason, he was moving from one chair to the other, and it was too slippery, and this poor old guy fell onto the ground. Anyway, he recovered and it was fine. But I had just gotten off stage because I was like, oh my God, if I would have been up there as Tracy and this guy would have gone down, I don't even know what I would have done. So all these different groups of people, right? And we've done comedy for how many different people, right?
Sure.
And my favorite are people who don't know that they're going to a comedy show because they're not prepped, they're not ready, and they don't care. And those are my kind of audiences. You know what I mean? The ones that really are glad you're there. And there's no rooms in this banquet hall. A very sterile banquet hall and, whatever. And also keep in mind, all these COVID restrictions are in. So we're getting our temperature taken and everybody's like separated to a certain extent. You can only go up to the bar with 5 people in line, like all of these rules and whatever. And I will commend them. They did a pretty good job with all that. So folks could still come and they could have this event this year. So anyway, she gets up and like everybody's getting dessert and she just goes, okay, well, and our comedy performance.
Yeah.
That's the intro.
Just so people, I guess non-comedians might not totally get this, but like when there's a show or an event going on, not even a show, just some sort of an event, right? And there's no introduction of what's going on. Someone's just like, now a comedy thing that is made, other than like following like a memorial for someone who died tragically, there is no worse way.
Oh, and I've done that.
Yeah. It's like, Yeah, right.
After this is very sad. So
we'll end
warning.
on this.
But after the shooting that happened in Aurora, Colorado, I think that was in the Batman viewing.
Yeah.
They did a memorial service for all the folks that had passed, and they hired us, the Second City, to perform. So they play. Not only is that an incredibly tragic and terrifying, right? We all have that fear now of like you know of a shooting happening in a public setting, right? Very, very traumatic. So they play this in memoriam video. I mean, way to bring the house down. And then they go, please, welcome to the stage, the Second City, you know? And we're like, I think our opener at the time, too, is this bit called Humps.
Yeah.
And it was just this song, and everybody would go out and you would just hump different parts of the stage, and it was like lit up. I mean, just the most inappropriate thing to follow this memoriam. So anyway, so I'm well versed for that. So she calls me up, and I'm just in my seat. And I'd already dressed as Tracy because I knew it was getting close to me going. And I just go, that's me. And everybody's so confused because it's also like when I play Tracy, it's so actually just me, just like my voice is different, you know, that like.
And you're wearing a neck brace and a blonde wig.
Right. That people are like, is this actually this woman? Like, is there something wrong with her? So people don't always know, especially if they're not well versed. Like, oh, this is an original comedy character for this comedic actress. Like, they don't know.
Yeah.
So it took them probably a solid 2 minutes to figure out what was going on. And then, like, they loved it because all of the hacky jokes worked great of like, look to your left, look to your right. You might think we don't have anything in common, but this is everybody's first time wearing pants. You know, like, you guys must really like each other because you had to get fully dressed to be here. Like, you know, all of those.
Very tepid crowd work type jokes.
Right, right. And
but those were like safe.
They were safe and it was fun. And, you know, it was a blast for me for the fact that I was like, I hadn't been, you know, up on stage IRL since March. Yeah. So it was just nice to do that. So. Well,
shout out to Sue. Congrats.
Congrats, Mom. You did it.
So guys, that was our episode this week. A little different than our usual format, but I think I like it better when we do these, you know, discussions.
Yeah, I mean, if you're still listening, you know, type in the comments, send us a DM, let us know. I mean, I think it's way more engaging. I think it's more fun. It's more fun for me.
The segments I like, but I think like we talked about, maybe they live separately as like a YouTube video series rather than part of the podcast.
That's, to speak to you guys, that's kind of what we're thinking is we're going to be focusing more on these long form conversations and just kind of talking about the world as the world changes. This is not a political podcast. I want to be very clear with that. It's just the world right now is political. So,
well, I think it's politically interested. We're just both nonpartisan people.
Right, but I don't want people to think every week we're going to be talking about, like, you know, I mean, this is not a political podcast, but we live in the world and we are expressive, you know, passionate people. It's going to get passionate. But I think it's interesting and I think it's good to give people, you know, a taste of something else. And I also think that it's important for people to hear people who really love each other be able to be challenging in a way that is important. And I think that it's good to remind people, even if there are folks that have more traditional values of like, you know, as a woman, like you're welcome to speak for yourself and think for yourself and, you know, challenge the way that you have been told life is for you. And I think that that's important. And I think these conversations are important. And, I certainly know I don't know everything and I have a lot to learn, which is also why I like and you know, enjoy engaging these dialogues with you because you teach me a lot. And it's true. And it's also good because, you know, I think the same thing is if you really believe that you believe something, why do you believe it? You know, and not that you should have to prove it to people.
I understand.
But I think it's important.
Even to yourself, to question it for yourself.
Yeah, I think
I'm a big believer in that.
I think it's important. So that's certainly where we're leaning. Again, we're going to be doing this hot rebrand in 2020.
We've got a couple names we're playing around with. We might reveal them to you at the end of the year. Kind of let you know what we're choosing, but kind of just something more in line with what this podcast is, because, you know, house rules, we just picked a name because,
well, we were starting, and, you know, if you're still listening, because I'm sure you're like, okay, we get it, but if you're still listening, how are you? I think I always tell people, I'm like, if you have an idea, start before you're ready. You'll figure it out as you do it. And this is a perfect example of, we wanted to figure out, like, what do we like? How do we want to do this? So this is, as always, a conversational podcast for people who like engaging conversations. Yes. That's what this podcast is. We are going to continue to have really engaging and interesting guests on when those folks become available to us.
I think we have one next week.
And yeah, so we'll have different people pop in. And then for all of the segments, because y'all know that we love them and I know that you guys love them too. So we're going to be doing that as secondary content because I think that's super important too.
Yes.
And then if you're like, oh, that was too, wow, LaForce and Getlin really got into it. I need a breather. Then you can jump over to all of our other, social media and check out all that fun.
We love the feedback, by the way. Also, Joey Houston just gave us a raise the roof emoji.
Yeah.
But we love
we
love the feedback. We love the comments. And as always, please, if you have a second, if you are able to, hop on Apple Podcasts, rate it, review it, subscribe, share it. That's a big thing. If you're like, hey, this is a fun podcast. I mean, again, our numbers are growing. We're still, every month, we're getting more and more downloads, more and more growth, which is really exciting. But we do have a wedding coming up. And if you want to give us a wedding gift that doesn't cost you anything at all, you can just do that. Tell a friend, share it, post it, review it, all that good stuff. As always, I am Alex Getlin.
I'm still Rachel LaForce.
And we will see you here next week with Joey. Joey, you in next week?
Yeah.
Joey's here too.